What's going on, everybody? My name is Kyren Monteiro. You're here on the Kyren Monteiro Show. This is episode number 5. Bang! Hitting you. Bam. I have the one and only Miss Charity Bailey, who is the Executive Director of the Economic Growth Council here in Grant County. Let's give her a round of applause.
Nice.
Got Mother's Day coming up.
That's right. It's just around the corner.
Just around the corner. I'm glad you reminded me of that. Happy early Mother's Day to all the
Absolutely. All the moms.
All the moms. Matter of fact, let's start off with that. What is the struggles of being a working mom?
Oh man. Really? That's where we're starting, huh?
Let's dive into it.
Oh man. I tell you, moms have a lot to do, and so much of it people don't even see, really, you know? I mean, I think about the course of my day and getting up early, and even just today, I did a load of laundry when I got up. I ironed some things, you know, I cleaned the kitchen, folded some blankets, you know, so it's like, again, by the time I get in my car to come to work, I'm tired because I did all this other stuff. And then after work, you know, there's kids. I have 3 kids. And, you know, it just sports, activities, all kinds of stuff that go on, you know, stuff around the house and full-time job that sometimes takes more than 8 hours a day to do. And it's just a lot.
Sounds like a lot. Round of applause for all the moms. I think a lot of times, I'll admit, I don't think men who are fathers, I don't think we realize how much y'all endure at times from putting up with us and kids.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a lot. Put you in a hot seat starting out. So you're working in Marion, but you're not from Marion. So
That's right.
Tell us how you grew up and what brought you here and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I am the daughter of a veteran.
Okay.
My dad served 20 years in the Coast Guard, and him and my mom moved all over the country. Their marriage started in Connecticut, and then he was stationed in Alaska, and that's where I was born. And then we went from Alaska to New York, where my brother was born, and then we were in Florida and Louisiana and Virginia, and that's where I graduated from high school in Virginia.
Okay.
And went to a big public high school. There were 500 people in my graduating class.
Sheesh.
Yeah, and wanted to go to a small school for my undergrad degree, so I picked a small Christian school in Kentucky called Asbury, and that's where I met my husband, and we spent 15 years in Lexington. We spent a few years in Ohio, working for a Catholic university there, and then back to Kentucky, and then my husband took a position at Taylor, so that's what brought us to the area. My bachelor's degree is in psychology, so all my jobs, well, I've had all kinds of random jobs. I never actually did like counseling or kind of the traditional psychology jobs I never fell into. But the degree has served me really well because it's come in handy in every job that I've had, just, you know, relating to people and listening and all of that. So when we moved, I was told to reach out to Tim Eckerly at the Growth Council because he knew lots of people and could maybe connect me to something, and I ended up getting hired at the Growth Council.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And as of January this year, you're now the executive director. So how has that journey been from you being with the Growth Council here?
Yeah, so I didn't think that I would ever be the executive director. I mean, Tim was there for 37 years, and I actually worked there and then left. And when I left, the 2 women that Tim hired, I thought for sure one of them was going to be the next director, and felt really good about who those 2 ladies were. And so when things changed and I was asked to come back again, I still didn't have the executive director position on the mind. You know, it was more of just getting Tim through retirement and kind of whatever was next, whoever that next director was. So when the board chose me, it was very honoring to be selected and for them to think that I had the abilities to run the organization. So since January, it has been a whirlwind. Like I have not stopped. I think one of my first meetings was with you.
Yep, it was.
In January. And so I've met some amazing people, from startups to, businesses, and business owners like yourself who have been in it a year and coming out of COVID and what that looks like for business owners. But also just getting to know the big manufacturers and the leaders in those companies and kind of everybody in between. It's been a really, really great, very busy first 4 months for me.
Round of applause again for him. So you graduated with a degree dealing with psychology, right?
Yep, I did. Yeah, so I graduated with my bachelor's degree 22 years ago. Yikes.
Nice.
Ugh, that hurts a bit. Yeah, ouch. And then I, because of my first round at the Growth Council, I decided to go back to school and get a master's degree. It's also in psychology, but with a focus on industrial organizational psychology. And that was the direct, I don't know what the right word is, not correlation maybe, from my first 3 years at the Growth Council. Like, I just really enjoyed workforce development and how organizations operate and what efforts can be put in place to make the organization be more efficient and what they can do to keep their employees.
Oh, that's what's up. That's what's up. Well, the reason I bring up psychology, because my wife has degrees, I should say, in social work. So she reminded me yesterday.
Yeah, you need to give her a round of applause.
Round of applause, yeah.
Yeah. She did more schooling than I did.
She'll be. I'll have her on here. I already told her that she's.
She should be.
Yeah, she's coming. But she told me that May was the mental health awareness. Mental health awareness month, which I wasn't aware of that. I don't really keep up with all the national days and awareness days. But with mental health, nowadays with social media and just the whole landscape of social communication has changed with humans. Like, how do you think social media has affected like modern day mental health issues?
Oh, it's huge. And, I don't think I don't think that was an intended outcome of social media. I think it was meant to bring people together. But when you combine social media with what we just came out of with COVID, mental health has kind of become a leading topic of interest. Obviously, the people who work in that industry full time know and have known that mental health was a big deal, and the care for individuals was important. But I think coming out of COVID even shed more light on just how fragile we are as people, and that we're not meant to be stuck in an apartment or to not be around coworkers. I mean, that's not how we were created to be, and so it's an unfortunate side effect of COVID for mental health and depression, anxiety, suicide. All of that is a very, very big deal.
So I think that therapy is important. I've been in therapy myself several different times in the past, and it helped, and it exposed my arrogance and things I needed to work on as a human being and as a man. But for people who don't trust that form of therapy, how else can people deal with mental health? Because a lot of people don't want to sit on the couch and tell somebody their problems.
Sure. I would encourage that as much as possible. I mean, counseling really is such a huge benefit. But if they're not comfortable with that, the first thing to do is to just tell your family doctor. even in urgent care. Let's say you go in because you have the flu or you're just not feeling good. If you just tell them that, there's something else going on, they can prescribe something potentially, or they can refer you to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, licensed clinical mental health worker to start helping you through that. But depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues, they're not going to go away on their own. Even the toughest person can't. You can't fix that because a lot of times it's a brain chemistry issue that needs to be addressed with a professional. So sometimes it's a quick, you can get it addressed within a matter of a few sessions, and sometimes it's a lifetime, battle to work through. And so that's where getting somebody else involved. Another thing is, if a person doesn't see a doctor regularly, even confiding in a close friend can sometimes help. Sometimes all you got to do is just talk about it. Just be like, man, I am really struggling today, and this is what I'm dealing with, and this is how I feel. When you can do that with somebody that you trust and you can confide in, it can make a big difference.
That's some good advice for people listening. Speaking of mental health, I feel like people spend most of their lives at work.
Yeah.
Like Monday through Friday, Saturday, sometimes 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. People spend a lot of time at work. For people who hate their job, how does that play on mental health? The reason I ask that is because I've worked in factories before, and I hated it. Mm-hmm. And I felt miserable. Mm-hmm. And not because it was a bad job, not because even the pay, it was more so that just wasn't where I was supposed to be at. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was supposed to add value in other areas. So, like, what would be your advice to people who are mentally struggling with jobs that they hate?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's such a big question because
My bad.
No, that's okay. There's a lot of there's a lot of internal evaluation that has to happen within that person to figure out what it is that they hate. Is it one particular aspect? Is it all of it? Is it the industry? Is it the shift? Is it their coworkers? Is it themselves? I mean, all of that. They have to look at all of that to decide what is next for them, whether it's a stay or a go decision. I had a friend of mine give me advice once when I was kind of in that same mindset of I was in a job that I was like, you know what, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. And I had a tough situation where I felt like I had maybe been discriminated against to some extent. And, the person said, every job has pros and cons, and you have to decide if the pros outweigh the cons. If they don't, then you have to work on lining up something else, or figuring out how to bring change in the job that you currently have. And kind of going into that mental health thing, sometimes it's just a change of attitude. It could be a mindfulness practice of thinking about what you're grateful for every day before you walk into your work. Those are, that's a simple thing to do. But other times it's just not a good fit, but it's really important to communicate with management, with your peers, again, telling them how you're feeling, what the problems are. A lot of times, I would say in Grant County, especially, employers, if you're a good person and you're trying to be at work on a regular basis and you're giving it everything you have, they're gonna figure out a way to keep you. They don't want you to leave, but they don't want you to be miserable either. So
speaking of employers, how can employers make the work environment better for the workers? Because I feel like the culture of a business is a reflection of the owners and management.
Mm-hmm.
So if the environment is hostile, probably got hostile management and owners. So how can that, how can work environments be better?
Well, the first thing is to conduct interviews or surveys. Find out what it is that your employees want and need and what is making them unhappy. I feel like sometimes employers want to they want to find that magic thing, whatever that is, and say, okay, across the board, this is what works. This silver bullet, of like, if we just employ this, then all of our employees will be happy. And it just doesn't work that way. There is not one thing that every employer in Grant County could do that would make all of their employees happy.
Right.
They have to do what is best for their employees. And if there's multiple facilities potentially, or, you might have a north branch and a south branch, those employees might need different things between the two offices. So that's where the employer has to do research to figure out what it is that their employees want and need, and be willing to listen and be willing to change. Don't ask them for advice if you're not going to make changes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in the manufacturing industries, which small cities like Marion, Indiana, where we're at, and in Grant County, like a lot of the U.S. is made up of small cities like this, with small businesses or big businesses. And I feel like in factories, warehouses, whatever is manufacturing related, it's not like a professional environment.
Right. Manufacturing is a very unique industry.
It's cutthroat.
It is.
It's like football,
it's
verbally.
nonstop, right?
Yeah.
They don't take vacations. They don't take holidays in some facilities. They can't always employ the common trendy workforce incentives that other places can, right? I mean, you can't say, yeah, you can have a flexible schedule and work remotely. You can't do that in manufacturing. You can't pick and choose, when you come to work, because if you're not there, a line shuts down or production decreases, which is money for the employer. So that's where the employer has to get creative. And they by starting with interviews and surveys, they might find out that their workforce culture might change, or it might change simply by adding, an extra 15-minute break to the day, or maybe there's something in the line that makes it difficult to stand for 8 hours a day, or something's not working well and it slows down production, or, maybe they need to adjust their shifts to account for working moms, speaking of Mother's Day, to have some secondary shifts set up for people who have limited transportation. All of those kind of things. The employers can do that will oftentimes not cost very much money, but they have to do what's beneficial for their employees.
Okay, let's transition to the Grant County Economic Growth Council. Explain why the organization exists and what it does for the community.
Yeah, so the Grant County Economic Growth Council has existed since 1984. It is an economic development organization, which pretty much every town, city, county at some level, state, region, will have economic development. So it is the organization that is behind the scenes working to bring businesses to a community.
Okay.
At its most basic core, that is its intended purpose.
Okay.
And so for the Growth Council, we have 5 pillars. This is a big part of what I'm doing this year as executive director, is talking about those 5 pillars, because the questions that you're asking are not, a one-off question. People ask, people wonder, well, what in the world does the Growth Council do anyway, all the time. So So the 5 pillars are business, retention, and expansion. So that's keeping and growing and helping the companies that are already here. That can be, a one-person frequency canvas business that's wanting to expand or get into podcast or whatever it might be, all the way up to, a 1,000, 2,000 employee operation that maybe needs to add some new equipment. So we help them through that process with whatever they need, whether it's contacts, resources, tax abatements, and anything in between. The second is attraction. So that's, again, getting to that basic core concept of economic development. So attracting new businesses to the community. That's a very multifaceted part of the job, because we have to look for opportunities to reach out to what's called a site selector, who is kind of like a realtor for a company that's they're searching. The company will come to them and say, hey, we want to expand in the Midwest. We need land that's approximately 100 acres, and we are going to expand to have 200 employees over the course of 5 years. We need good water. We need X amount of electricity. We need rail service. And so then the site selector is the one that goes about, they do all the research to figure out what part of the country works best for them, what sites, and it kind of narrows down from like a big funnel. So it starts at the state levels, and then the state sends it out to all of those local economic development offices. Those offices respond with sites that might work for the client, and then it goes all the way back through the cycle where the site selector then presents it to the client, and they narrow it till they pick, usually they pick a top 3. And then at that point, that's when they go and they visit each site, and they're in the city for a couple of days, and they have lots of meetings with local elected officials, and they want to talk to all the utility folks, and ultimately that's how a decision is made.
That's a lot.
It's a big deal. So then the third one is workforce, and I kind of talked about that a little bit. We do everything from job fairs to setting up training, workshops, anything that a business needs. They might say, hey, we just hired 10 employees. They all need leadership training. Then we can step in and figure out which higher ed institution or, which partner might be able to supply that training for them. So the fourth is collaboration. That one includes all of our local elected officials, working with mayors and councils, and I'm doing a lot of that this year too, trying to get to all the different town and city council meetings at least once a quarter. Well, that's not true. Probably once a year, I'll at least stop in all of the 11 towns and cities to introduce myself and hear what's going on in their community. It's also working with all of the higher ed institutions. Grant County's really lucky to have 3. So working with them and highlighting the work of the students would fall under collaboration, as well as anything with any other nonprofits in the area, Chamber of Commerce and Community Foundation, and anybody else that needs help. That's what we do. And then the last one is entrepreneurship, which you've talked about multiple times. Thank you very much. And part of that is our investor event and what we do to recognize entrepreneurs. And again, anywhere from, meeting with one person who's like, I have this really crazy idea. What does it take to actually turn this into a business? And now I can say, well, I would go listen to Kyren's podcast because you talked about that. So anything from that to helping them get more established. Maybe it's somebody who's moving from a food truck to an actual business location, and so we would help them through that process as well.
So, because that's a whole lot. So on previous episode 1, I had Ronnie Morrell Jr. Previous episode right before this, I had Keenan Davis, and both of them serve in the community, the entrepreneurs, but they sit on boards and just do a lot of stuff in the community. And both of them have touched on progression for Grant County, but especially Marion, right? Because Marion is the biggest city. So I feel like if Marion does better, then the rest of the county has a chance. Without Marion doing well, Grant County is in trouble. We're the biggest city here. So for entrepreneurs that want to come up in Marion, like you said, whether it's small or big, how important is that from like an economic development point? That people at least attempt to make something happen, even if they fail.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely benefits in failure. So I don't think people should be afraid of that. I know it's hard. I know that a lot of times it's a person's own money that they're investing and they don't want it to fail. But it's hard. It's hard being an entrepreneur. I've never been one, but I've been around a lot of them. And I know how hard it is, and I know how independent entrepreneurs are and how they're so passionate about what they love. And I would say that's maybe another point to add to your podcast. You talked about three things you needed to be an entrepreneur. I would say the fourth is passion, because if you don't have passion, you're going to burn out so fast from trying to start, right? I'm sure you could tell stories about that.
Yeah, but passion without drive and execution is pointless, though.
Right, and passion and drive, there might be some overlap there,
For sure. But you see a lot of people who have passion about something.
Sure.
Maybe about that craft, but not business, you know?
So I'll give a perfect example with the Parkers, who are starting Parker's Seafood Kitchen, and they have their grand opening on Saturday.
Saturday, what date is that?
7th,
May 7th.
At noon.
Okay.
Here in Marion on Branson Street. But that project came to be because of passion. Now, they had something that nobody else was offering. I'm trying to remember what your other two were.
Spending time, step 2. So step 1 was identifying the skill set.
Yeah.
Step 2 was making it a learned profession, and then 3 was turning it into a legitimate business.
Yeah. So then with the second one, I mean, they were making seafood for friends and family out of their house, and people were just, they just couldn't get enough of it. So, okay, now you've just went from a hobby of cooking your favorite food because it's your favorite to turning it into something that people want, right? And then the third one is, what was the third one again?
Starting it, making it
it happen.
Yeah.
And I tell you, that couple has slowly gone through every step of the process, willing to walk away if they needed to. And every door has opened in the timing that it needed to open to make this what it is now, and getting ready to have a grand opening in a restaurant. And I don't know if that would have happened without passion.
Okay.
Passion is huge. But you do have to have drive, because if you don't have the drive, every time a door closes, you're going to feel like you can give up. Yeah. So, I mean, to answer your question, entrepreneurship is huge. It's huge in every community. It's what creates vibrancy, It's what brings in variety, right? If we just had... Now, some people would say, well, it's the large employers that hold the community together. True, based on tax revenue, those large companies are going to bring in a lot of money to a community. But we need small business owners who want to step out and try something new. It's people like you who are bringing a totally new industry to Marion and Grant County, potentially. You have an opportunity to introduce out-of-state, out-of-town folks to Marion and Grant County by what you do. And that's what small business owners bring to the table.
So it's definitely worth people stepping out, trying, you would say? Well,
worth it is, I don't know, that sounds lackadaisical, I guess, to me. If the person can do what you said that they can do as a foundation to starting a business, and they're willing to put in the hard work and to stick with it, and they have the resources to do it, it's definitely beneficial to your community to step into that.
Well, I think there's people with potential, but fear
is huge.
Fear will paralyze your dreams, I feel like.
Absolutely. And sometimes there's not a solution to that. They just have to work through it. And they may not see the worth for a lot of years, but if they can really kind of dig in, and obviously there needs to be a big dose of reality in there too. Because you can dig in and then find out, there's 5 other people doing what I do. Or, this really isn't working because I didn't think of whatever. That's where that failure part comes in, where sometimes you do just have to say, I gave it a try, but it's not the right time. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't worth the investment and the effort and lesson learned. You move on and you try something else. Okay.
Yellow button don't never get off.
You like that button.
I like it. So, wrapping up, what are some advices that you would give to, I would say women in general, but moms in the professional who desire to be like in the professional world? You may have moms in warehouses, factory, and they like, I want to be a director. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to whatever, because I know that women, that's a whole minority struggle within itself. So I know that's kind of a broad, big question, but what would your advice in general be?
Yeah, I mean, I think women, especially moms, I would say, tend to always put themselves last. They're always going to put their children and their family first, at least from what I've seen. And so if sometimes life doesn't allow for a woman to put her dreams first all the time. It's just not possible when you're raising children or you have a spouse or a partner or whatever it is. So for those women who are working in manufacturing or they're working in a job that they hate, regardless of what industry that is, I think the big thing to do is to figure out what your goal is and to keep taking steps as you're able. I waited 20 years to go back to school because it just wasn't possible for me to do that before. And so, there it is again. So I would just say to just map it out as best as you can and to take little steps when you're able. And just know that those years raising children and sacrificing are not for, what's the right phrase? They're not for nothing, where you are might be where you need to be for the time being, but, set some goals for yourself, communicate with your boss, tell them what your goals are. Tell them, you might have a desire to be a manager someday. What does it take for me to get to that here? Or I really want to learn such and such skill. I like working here. I really want to learn this skill. Would you consider paying for me to take this class because it'll help my family in the long run? Communicate and stick with it as best as you're able. Speak up for yourself. Don't feel like you have to cower in the corner or you have to make any additional sacrifices. Your family is first. Put them first, and do what you can to move your goals forward when you're able to.
Well, Charity, I appreciate you coming on here for episode number 5.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
5. I'll take it, I guess.
And I also want to say to everybody, Happy Mother's Day. Happy early Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
This will be released before Mother's Day. And mental health awareness. Yeah, so shout out and salute to everybody working in the mental health, psychology fields. I never know what to really call it. There's so many terms,
Yeah, I think mental health is a good general umbrella for that industry.
Well, salute to everybody that works in mental health industries as well. And yeah.
Thanks, Kyren.
We got Charity Bailey, the economic director of the executive director of the Economic Growth Council here in Grant County. So we appreciate having you.
Thanks.
All right. See y'all next time.